Welcome to a Right Now special. It's the 19th of March 2021, almost to the day, a calendar year since the planet was flipped upside down and our lives changed completely. On the 23rd of March 2020, the UK locked down for 3 weeks to flatten the curve. That was nearly 52 weeks ago. And as we speak, the UK is still locked down. As the weeks have gone by, more and more people have realised that this is never meant to end. The government will simply move the goalposts again and again, as they have done all year. Because of this, there's been a growing protest movement across the UK. Predictably, the government have now passed a bill giving the police more and more powers to shut down peaceful protests and take away that fundamental human right to speak out and oppose the actions of those that are meant to serve us. Save Our Rights UK have played a fundamental role in standing up to the tyranny in this country, and it's a pleasure to be joined by founder Louise Creffield. How are you?
I am good, thank you.
What does this?
Thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. What does this policing bill mean for our right to protest?
So this policing bill has a whole section on public order. And the way they've done it is quite clever, because what they've said is that we are going to be restricted if we are causing significant disruption to organisations and people. So it's making protesters to be out to be the bad guy. And they're actually looking after regular public and just trying to help. So that's where we're at. So they can shut down any protest, including a one-man protest, if they believe that it's going to disrupt any organisation in the vicinity.
But surely, looking at it, I'm thinking the idea of a protest is to disrupt and to be noticed. So it's almost like what they've done with the bill is they've just made it so broad that actually it's just going to include everyone and everything.
Yeah, you'd pretty much have to be out in a field on your own to not be affecting any organisation in the local vicinity, which, you know, and then why would you be doing it out in a field away from nobody? Nobody's going to hear and nobody's going to see, and it won't make an impact. So that's exactly what they want. They want to basically prevent any protests any which way, and this is a great way for them to do it.
It does feel like that it's almost like they can then say, look, we're not stopping people protesting. You can still protest, but like you say, you can do it on your own in a field where it's not going to have any impact or make any difference whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they're doing, and that's what they do. They always have a plausible explanation, you know, because they're using the XR protests of last year, where XR caused a significant amount of disruption in London, but everybody knew what was going on. Everybody was listening to what they were saying. Everybody heard what they were saying. Everybody knew about it. You couldn't not know about it. And that's the whole point, is you want to make your voices heard in a society where our voices are silenced most of the time. So even if you don't agree with whatever message is being protested, you know, the fact that we heard what XR had to say proved that their way of protesting did the job, because we all heard it. And they are using that as their excuse, saying that caused too much disruption, it's not okay, it upset Joe Bloggs walking down the street, and therefore we're going to protect Joe Bloggs and prevent any such thing happening again in the future.
So for yourself, with Save Our Rights UK, you look at that bill, how does it change your outlook and how you would manage things?
Well, I think the thing to remember is that it's interesting how people are getting upset about this now, when actually this has pretty much been the case for the last year. We've not been allowed to protest for a year now. During lockdown, the first lockdown, second, and this current one, it has been deemed completely illegal to protest. And I don't understand why people are only just getting upset about it now. And we carried on protesting throughout the whole thing. There was a brief interlude where protests were allowed if you had a risk assessment, which isn't quite the same as just being allowed to do a protest. But, you know, and even then, people getting arrested and charged, as myself have been, and I've been caught on the 20th of May with that, even when it was supposedly legal. So this has been going on the whole time Save Our Rights has been around, and so therefore it won't really affect us. But it just, the benefit is that people have realised now that protesting is being silenced. I don't know how they didn't realise it sooner, but I'm kind of glad it's come more to the forefront and is a bigger point of conversation.
I think the reason people didn't notice, probably, Louise, which is it didn't affect them. I think that's probably like anything, people tend to be inherently selfish, unfortunately, in that case. So do you think then that maybe this could actually be a positive? Because I know I've seen a lot of people getting very, kind of very upset about it. Obviously, of course they are. But at the same time, could this bring people together? So you'd have the BLM, you'd have Extinction Rebellion, you'd have the anti-lockdown protest. And actually we can go, do you know what? This is a war on all of us.
There's absolutely a positive to this. I'm seeing so many groups now speaking out that haven't spoken out one jot through the last year about the right to protest, and now they're angry about it. And at some point this whole COVID narrative, must stay at home to save lives thing, will end, and if we're still not allowed to protest, then people are going to be upset about it. So there is definitely benefits. And to be honest, there's benefits to everything the government does, every lockdown, everything, because more and more people realize what's going on. The more ridiculous it is, the more people that join our movement. So there's always benefits to this, but this one is uniting a lot of people. It's also interestingly uniting us with travellers as well, because they're essentially outlawing being a traveller within this bill as well. So there's a lot of people who are very upset about this bill, and hopefully that will just strengthen our side, basically.
Do you think maybe, like you see it in other countries quite a lot across Europe, where the police almost, they take their helmet off, or they take a knee, or whatever is deemed in that nation to be a symbol of I'm with you? Do you think we could see the police doing that? Because obviously these decisions are being made way above PC and WPC.
Yeah, the hope is that we will. I'm in conversation with one of the founders of Police for Liberty in Spain, and we are looking at starting a UK version called Police for Freedom, because we know for a fact there are police in there that feel like we do. It's just a case of, they're a bit scared to speak to their colleagues in case they get in trouble, and we know that they're there, but we have to unite them. So this is a call to any of them that, if you haven't already, please do check out the Police for Freedom website. And we're trying to unite as many together, because it's that thing of there's always strength in numbers. And I do think this is another going to push that's going to affect the police, and they're going to be really questioning if they're doing the right thing by shutting down peaceful protests just because it disrupts somebody going to the shop. That's kind of part and parcel of a protest. And it's short-lived, and it's not a life-threatening disruption, so why should it be stopped?
Exactly. And also the fact is that the police are going to be in the front line. So when people rebel against these measures, they're not going to be rebelling against the politicians, they're going to be rebelling against the police on the street, and they're not going to want to face that either.
Absolutely not. I feel like it could get quite heated, to be honest. I think as this bill progresses through Parliament, because it's got to be remembered that it's not actually passed yet, and there is potential for amendments to be brought forward, especially around this section. So we're not all hope is lost yet. So there will be actions to take on the Save Our Rights website. But I think this is a point where the police could really come into some trouble if they are trying to shut down regular peaceful protests for something that really means a lot to somebody. That person isn't going to take it well. And if they're doing this over and over and over again, then at some point somebody will lose their temper, and it could get quite heated.
Yeah, I think that's something, there's a very real possibility of that happening. Obviously there's a protest in London tomorrow, but there's also, there's protests all over the world tomorrow. So, fingers crossed that movement can grow. Part of me kind of feels as well, like with these things, are we going to be in a situation where you're going to get 10 years in prison for protesting? Or is it a case of it's almost fear-mongering. So they're almost chucking these things in there as a deterrent. I mean, I like to think, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I like to think that no one's going to prison for 10 years for it.
Yeah, I think we would be very hard pushed to see anybody actually going to prison for 10 years for it. You know, even these £10,000 fines for organising protests haven't actually been paid, you know, because nobody can afford £10,000, you know, and if you take it to court, then they have to look at what you can reasonably afford, and that isn't £10,000. So, yeah, nobody's actually really paying these fines either. It's all just it's used as a kind of deterrent. You know, the last time I was out in London in January, I got surrounded by a dozen police officers when I was walking on my own, and was threatened with either a £10,000 fine or arrest. And really, what they wanted to do was arrest me and put me on bail conditions. But I said I'd take the £10,000 fine, and then they realised they had no justification to give me one, so I didn't get one, and I didn't get arrested, and I just went off home. But they like to use fear tactics to try and control the populace as much as possible, knowing full well that these things won't stand up and they can't actually enforce them.
Exactly. Well, what, if you don't mind me asking, what is happening in May? So you've got a court case. What does that entail? What exactly are you up for?
So in May, it's just the plea hearing where I'll be entering a plea of not guilty, and I have been charged with 4 counts of organising protests on the 29th of August, 26th of September, 24th of October and 28th of November. And then 4 counts of attending the protests that I organised. Like, I don't think that's a thing. Like, if you can attend something you organise, but that's what they're charging me with. So I've got 8 counts in total. And obviously 2 of those were during the time when we had risk assessments and the police said go ahead. So you know, it's going to be very interesting, and I'll be pleading not guilty, and then the trial will come at a later date.
I mean, call me naive, but if the police have said you can do it, surely that's done, isn't it? That's done. That's over my head, that one. Yeah.
It's completely over my head too, you know, and yeah, it baffles me, the whole situation, but this is where we're at. And, you know, the Met Police drove down from London and arrived on my doorstep in Brighton to hand me these charges the other week, because apparently I was important enough for them to do that, just for organising protests. And the fact that anybody is appearing in court for organising protests is outrageous, and that should have been enough to get everybody's back up, and unfortunately it wasn't. But thankfully this bill is highlighting this problem hugely, so hopefully we will garner more support now, and lots more groups are getting involved, so we can unite behind this. But it's got to just be recognised that this has been a problem for over a year now, and it baffles me that people didn't see it.
No, I know what you mean. I think the idea of driving from London all the way down to Brighton to give you a bit of paper, how does that work into the government's new green policy, I wonder? Obviously, you're not just doing, with Save Our Rights, you're not just doing the protests, but also, I think the last time we spoke down in Cornwall, you were talking a lot about, obviously, the biggest fear for everyone is the vaccine, in terms of, if you want it, you go and have it, but if I don't, am I going to be coerced into having it? Am I going to be made to have it? Am I going to have my ability to feed my family taken away from me? And you've been doing a lot in terms of the legal side of that and the legality, and just whether they can get away with that. Could you just tell us a little bit about what you've been doing with that?
Yeah, so we've got an ongoing campaign called the Medical Freedom Bill, where we are campaigning to ask the government to pass a piece of legislation that prohibits anybody discriminating against anybody based upon their vaccine status or even their test status, because this is the other thing, is they're talking about COVID status certifications, where you'll get a green light either if you've had a vaccine or if you've just had a lateral flow test and got a negative response. And there's an element where the government may well not roll these things out themselves directly, but allow others and private entities to do it for them, therefore mandating it by default, but without the liability of the government. And my argument is that the government not doing it isn't enough. The government have to prevent anybody doing it, and that should just be standard. It shouldn't even be a question. It should just be the basics, because it goes against every ethical medical law that there is around. You can't do that, because people have to give free and informed consent to any medical procedure. And so we're asking for the Medical Freedom Bill, which wouldn't kind of say be specific to like COVID stuff. It would just be a bill that prevents any coercion or mandation of any medical procedure, to protect us against any future implication or suggestion from the government. That they could come up with all sorts of stuff, and there might be another pandemic 5 years down the line, and we want to be protected against all of that sort of stuff. So we're campaigning for the Medical Freedom Bill, and it's got to a point now where we've been people have been writing into their MPs every month, since November, and actually it's gaining a lot of traction. There isn't an MP in the House that doesn't know what we're talking about now, and also they're running out of arguments, because their argument was, oh no, we don't think it'll happen in the beginning, back in November, December, and the vaccine minister said that would be really bad, so it definitely won't happen. And now obviously the government are talking about it, and Michael Gove is, they're like, oh well, it might happen, so we're going to keep an eye on it, and we will take your points into consideration. But it's so it's good. It's been really successful in the fact that we're getting more support, getting our arguments across. They're running out of ways to counter us. So and we're keeping on. At the moment, we're also emailing Michael Gove directly, because he's leading the review. So he's had thousands of emails into his inbox, which I'm sure he really appreciates.
Yeah, he'll love that.
That's the role of an MP, to be lobbied.
The thing, the key bit that you said in that is how is this even a conversation? I'm the same as that. Like, and I see people talking about it, and I think we're at a position now where the Spandau Ballet lookalike guy from Pimlico Plumbers somehow has something to say over what you put in your body or not, in terms of whether you can earn a living or not. That to me is, I can't get my head. I'm trying to find the words to actually compute that's a thing in 2021, but yet here we are.
Absolutely. And this is the thing, is I was looking through, and there's about 8-9 international declarations that the UK have put their signature to, that state that this is not legal, basically. So you've got the UNESCO bioethics, you've got the UN Charter of Medical Ethics, and so many more. And in each of them, it talks about how the rights of an individual should outweigh that of society and science. It also says, there should be, every individual should be free to consent to any medical procedure without discrimination or recrimination for not taking them. And this is repeated time and time and time again, and rightly so. So how could they even consider going against this? But the problem is, we've actually kind of already been going against it with the mandated tests. This whole, you can't land in this country without having a test. This whole schools testing, they've been mandating tests for people who work in care homes. So the problem is, it's actually already creeped in. These people are consenting to a medical procedure that they don't really consent to. And the side effects and the consequences of those things aren't anywhere near as potentially drastic as a vaccine. But actually, people need to be as up in arms about that as they would be about mandated vaccines, because it's a slippery slope, and we're already on it, unfortunately.
Absolutely, we are, and it's certainly time for people to wake up. If people want to support Louise or support Save Our Rights, please go to saveourrights.uk. Thanks for speaking to us today, Louise, and hopefully I'll bump into you tomorrow.
My pleasure. Hopefully, see you there.
I hope this bill will be a wake-up call for everyone across the country, from all backgrounds, all political beliefs, from BLM to Extinction Rebellion to anti-lockdown. These laws are aimed at all of us. We're all the target. But as with everything, if we stand together, we're far more daunting to face. Have a great weekend from everyone here at Iconic.